My name's Chris Ayers. I'm a senior customer engineer at Microsoft. So I'm part of what we call the fast track for Azure team. And one of the things my team does is they are available to pretty much anyone who has an Azure subscription. Um, and if you get a nomination, one of the things we do is we help remove roadblocks from your implementation of services onto Azure. So if you're struggling trying to combine multiple services, or there's kind of a gap in documentation, it doesn't make sense, that's where we come in and we try to help resolve those issues. We try to improve the Azure platform and improve the documentation so that it's a better place for all of us to work on. I tweet a bunch. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a blog, and I have code on GitHub that has running samples and stuff. So I will leverage some of that code later. It is up there checked in, so you can use it as an example. So let's dive in. And I guess a little bit more. I've been programming since second grade. I've been doing this professionally since the 90s. I've worked in a large number of industries, and I've been a consultant doing everything from retail and legal to military to education. And yeah, I love speaking and helping people understand technology. So today we're going to talk about application insights and how we can leverage it to monitor and troubleshoot our applications. I'm going to go into the SDK itself. I'm going to talk a little bit about something called telemetry processors as well as telemetry initializers. So if you've never heard of those terms, this will be a treat for you because it really lets you unlock the power of some of the telemetry in the system. I'm going to do some demos, and of course there's questions. You don't have to save them till the end. We can talk about them as we go through. So let's keep going. App insights, application insights. What is it? Well, it is a type of application performance management, or APM suite. It ties together everything from metrics to performance data. It can capture end user experience. So it has hooks into JavaScript where it can capture how the page is rendering and how long requests are taking at the browser level. It can capture errors and then other trace and log information that you might want to provide it. Now, the way all this works kind of under the hood is there is a component that gets installed in your web app. Now, that monitoring can happen because you pull in a NuGet package or a library if you're using other languages, or it can happen kind of automatically through the platform. And I'll talk about some of that auto instrumentation. There's also a small snippet of JavaScript code that can get added to web pages that can let you have browser level tracing. And then if you're running in Azure or even on like on-prem in IIS, you can install an agent that will gather data about like the running platform, CPU memory. If you're doing Azure SQL or containers, that information can all be fed back into the App Insights itself. That uses all sorts of analysis and AI to generate alerts, so it can detect if something is abnormal, and I'll go into this. You can export it out to Power BI for reporting. It integrates with Visual Studio itself so that you can see errors and interactions directly from your IDE. And there's other options for exporting out the data or integrating. So a lot of the cool things that are there are extra, like the core things I think everyone uses when they're leveraging application insights to do kind of troubleshooting of stuff or continuous monitoring, are looking at kind of request rates, response times, failures. Like those are very important. If you start seeing a rise in failures, you want to trigger an alert. You want to go look into what's happening now. If you have dependencies, you're calling out to HTTP services, you're calling out to a database, and your dependency response times like suddenly spike and it's like taking seconds instead of milliseconds. That's important to look at. If you start getting these exceptions, or the page rendering is taking a long time, all of these things can be triggered on, and you can explore them in depth to figure out exactly what happened. You overlay that with things like user interaction. So how many users are hitting our system right now? Do we have an abnormal number of sessions? What are some of the performance counters? Is maybe the CPU or memory spiking on certain things? Is there something going on with the underlying host? Are there extra trace logs that we're sending out? And then things that might matter to your specific application. We can generate custom events. Maybe you want to track that someone has signed up for something or added something to their cart. Those are events that matter to your business application that Application Insights doesn't know out of the box. So I will show you how to do some of that stuff in a variety of platforms. Any questions at this point before we get into the good part? Because the good part's coming. All right, so let's keep going. One of the things I mentioned earlier is smart detection. Smart detection kind of as it monitors your application, it starts learning the baseline. What's your normal memory usage? What's your normal response time? What's your normal error rate? And so if things start to deviate from that, it can generate a smart alert. And you can see here, there's an abnormal rise in exception volume, and I'll show this. Maybe insecure URL access detected. So there are things that can surface that you might not even know are happening. And with the smart detection, you can start having places to go look at what's happening. As you run your application, it starts detecting which components talk to which components. Now you have control over this, how it's named, like the cloud roles that are running. So you can provide names to individual components or groups of components. Here, this front end has 2 instances. So you could have a load balanced or multiple instances of a container or some sort of front end and tag it as that front end. And because App Insights handles distributed telemetry and distributed tracing, you can see an incoming request on the front end going through multiple services through the back end. And so you can see the entire chain of requests and dependencies that make up a given interaction. Now, I've worked in lots of systems online, and it's always a pain. Like trying to roll your own distributed tracing library or go, we're going to have this operation tag and then that one and keep track of them. Probably doing it wrong. It's probably a pain in the butt. Like, don't try. There are multiple services out there that can help with this. This supports, and I'll show you some of the documentation on it, but what's also great is you don't have to capture every request. You can kind of filter to have a certain percentage of requests so you can monitor trends. And if you have a request that's coming in the front end, it will trace all of the stuff all the way through front end, back end, in between. So you don't have to do some sort of extra logic to make sure all the things are included properly. The platform will take care of that for you. Application Insights also offers a profiler. So you can have it profile parts of your code, and you can see it kind of runs randomly a couple times every hour for a couple of minutes. And this starts to try to identify in your code base what are the areas of code that are under intense activity. So you can see, hey, this is a 99th percentile example. It happened at this point. You can start to see how you can focus your attention on certain parts of your code. There's usage interactions. Now these kind of have a more of a web app integration feel. So as people are interacting with a web application, you can start getting information like browser version, a region. You can see how often they hit, how many sessions they've had, how often they come back. You can start tracking their flow. Maybe they're hitting the front page, and then going to this other page, and then doing this. And you want to figure out why they're not signing up, or are they skipping over some sort of marketing material. I implemented this user flow at an organization I worked at, and it was very impactful. So we had an application that people could add items into kind of a grid, and there was a quick edit kind of control where it was kind of like a spreadsheet, and you could edit certain fields very quickly without having to kind of open up a full page of detail view. And so we were trying to optimize customers coming in, adding a bunch of things to this grid, quickly editing volumes and what they needed of them, and then kind of checking out and moving on. What we noticed when we implemented user flows is they would add stuff to this grid, and then they would open up the detail for each and every item and make changes in that detail view. And so when we interviewed our customers seeing this weird behavior, we found out that in our quick edit grid, there were certain columns and fields that we were not providing them that they wanted to use. So we were able to change some of the columns that were visible in the quick edit grid. And then our user flow changed to like add, interact with the quick edit, add, interact with the quick edit, and check out. And so it was a streamlined experience and it had higher customer satisfaction. But we were able to like see that we had implemented this feature poorly because it wasn't being used as designed by looking at user flows and interactions. So I think that was a really great win for our organization, leveraging some of this technology. Now, as events happen, sometimes you need to search for them. Maybe you want to search for specific events, or requests, or exceptions. You can drill down to a certain time period. You can look at specific URLs. You can drill down to any custom properties you might add to telemetry or a browser or a region. So as you're troubleshooting and monitoring, you can really hone in on exactly the time period of the event or the system that you're trying to examine. I'm going to demo all of this live, so just bear with me. And finally, there's metrics, and this is where you can have really detailed metrics and overlay it with things around the platform, CPU memory, specific session counts, request times, dependency counts, and you can overlay multiple metrics on top of each other to look for correlations between them. And I've used this in many organizations as well, having a dashboard, building out a dashboard with multiple metrics, multiple queries, all showing things at the same time. The other thing we've used instead of dashboards has been the live metrics stream. So as the application is running, you'll see live like incoming requests and durations and failures, telemetry from the dependencies and the traces live on one screen. So we've put this up on a big monitor before, and that's something that has helped us kind of keep an eye on things as we do releases, as we go into like a busy weekend or Black Friday or those type of events. All right, so let's look at how you interact, how you add, how you leverage App Insights, and you do that by interacting with the SDK. So the SDK, and is there a question?
Yeah, real quick. I've been looking at Open Telemetry lately for trading, and I was wondering how does that relate here to? Is Application Insights built on top of it? Or
so Application Insights.
So what's the roadmap for Application Insights?
Yep.
Thanks.
I got you. So Application Insights actually kind of started with the Visual Studio team, if I remember correctly, and Azure Monitor started with the Azure team. So these are two products that have kind of combined and come together over the years, along with Log Analytics. Open Telemetry support is being added to App Insights, and I will show you the documentation on how to enable and leverage Open Telemetry with App Insights. So I am going to come to that. But that's a great question, because I think as people are starting to look at the cloud native landscape and are using things like Grafana and Prometheus, sometimes they want to integrate applications into one board. So I'm definitely going to circle back to that shortly. All right. So just to keep moving on at the moment, there are a lot of provided libraries out there today. So there's a .NET series of libraries. There's an SDK available for Java. There's multiple for JavaScript. You've got maybe an Angular or React one, pure JavaScript stuff that you can pull in and implement on your own. We've got Node SDKs and Python, and it works with a large number of logging frameworks. So the .NET 6 and Core, iLogger, can pull up, can integrate with App Insights right out of the box. You can do, syslog, log4net, nlog, all of those all work. There's log4j integration and Java and logback. So just logging to your normal logging systems when you enable the App Insights SDK, you can capture your logs as well as a lot of the telemetries. There's a lot of support for different platforms. So there is, and I pointed it out earlier a little bit, you can instrument apps that are already running in Azure without changing your applications. So the platform itself can do codeless, kind of have an agent running on the app service or the function. So you can use that for a VM or virtual machine scale set, app service. If you've got ASP things hosted in the cloud like function apps or web apps, those can all be enabled with a couple of clicks, and I'm going to show you that. App functions, and then you can apply the SDK for everything from like mobile apps, Android and iOS, Java, Node, desktop apps, React. I'm going to show you a console app as well. And then we've got integration with Power BI and Stream Analytics. So there's a lot of support there. You can do that codeless monitoring on-prem as well. There is an agent you can install in your Windows VMs. Just like I said, you can leverage it in Azure with functions and Kubernetes and VMs. When you are leveraging the SDK, and you've pulled up the SDK, I mentioned that you can do custom events, custom metrics. So there's a large number, and these are the main APIs that are available in the SDK. So if you have a single page app and on the back end, it just might see you get a request for slash. So in your JavaScript code, Angular, React, Vue, you might want to do a track page view so that you can show when different components on the front end switch and change. And so you can have that extra bit of information on which front end page or component they're on. Those events, maybe adding things to a cart or signed up or added it to a wish list. Those are events that you can then track and build into those user flows. If you have metrics, maybe you're doing processing and you have some sort of queue or message bus that you're sending information to, or you're extracting items. Those might be metrics that you want to track as you're going through your processing. A lot of exceptions are happened out of the box, but you can track explicit exceptions. You can track explicit requests and traces. And I'll show this in a few code samples in a minute. When you're dealing with monitoring and troubleshooting, it's just like with security. A lot of times, it's okay to log all the things. Now, you might not want to log all the things all the time, but it doesn't hurt to log all the things. And with App Insights, a lot of, I do want to point out the SDK kind of runs on a background thread, and it will run out of band, so it doesn't really impact the performance of your application. It's like 1 to 2% potential performance impact because it's running on the side and doing some I/O. But if you do log everything, and I will also touch on this as we dive into the code, there is costs. This is based on kind of Azure Monitor data ingestion costs. So you do get 90 days retention. You can get these multi-step web tests, and I'll show what that means. And ping web tests, those you get, but you get 5 gig free ingestion per month, and then it's an extra $2 a gig per month after that. That pricing is available out on the Azure pricing calculator. But let's say you're logging all this data. You're logging every event, every request. That can add up quickly if you have a lot of distributed applications and you're bouncing requests between services. And so this is where sampling comes into play. So sampling lets you adjust that volume. Do you really need 100% of all telemetry every time? A lot of the intention, I think, with App Insights is understanding the trends in the application. So if you're have deployed something and it's running stably for a while, you might not need 100% of all of your traffic captured. Maybe you only need 50% or 30%. Now, if you have it at 30% and an error happens, errors are always captured every time. So you don't have to worry about errors being filtered out. But if it's just normal hitting your web page 1,000 times a day, 10,000 times a day, you might not need every single one of those requests if they're the exact same. So that's where the sampling comes in. By default, if you just set up the app insights in your application, it'll most likely do adaptive sampling in your ASP application. You can explicitly control it. So there are variables where you can set it in your code, in your configuration files. Let's say I want 10%, I want 20%. Or if you just leave it alone and you don't change anything on the SDK, you just use the defaults there. At the App Insights service itself, you can throw away data. So what would happen is your app would probably send all the data to the cloud, but then the App Insights service would only ingest 20 or 30% of it. And this type of setting only happens when you haven't really configured it on the other ones. I will show this as we get into it. I just want to bring it up that these are some options you have. And I mentioned earlier, telemetry processors and initializers. Again, I'm just trying to cover these topics quickly so that we can get into the code. But what these do are, processors and initializers are used to add or modify your properties. So if you have standard telemetry that's going out and you want always to add, is this an admin user? Is this a guest user? Or this is a certain type of, property that you need to add, the data center is coming from, or whatever it might be for your specific application, you can do that. Now, typically the initializers are used to add or modify that telemetry data, and processors are used to filter them out. So if you always know you might get a 404 on certain images and you just don't want to see those in your logs anymore, you can add a processor to filter that out. I'm going to show that. Again, initializers, they might be called more than once. They are guaranteed to be called. If you have a bunch registered, they're guaranteed to be called for every single telemetry item. You can also override values. Processors, these can do the same thing. The initializers always run first. And you can, like I said, just drop telemetry, not even send it out to the cloud if you don't want to. I will show these. I will send out links to this deck so that we can go into more depth. But let's get to the demos. Like I've done enough talking on this stuff. Any questions before we do? Because I do want to get to that open telemetry question. All right. So I've got a couple of samples out here in GitHub. I will share these. But as I mentioned, there is SDKs available for like .NET Core, .NET, Java, Node, web apps, Python, JavaScript with both React Native, and Angular. So we've got lots of varieties of this. Again, you asked about open telemetry. We've got open telemetry right here. So there's detailed instructions on how to enable it. Now, open telemetry is kind of in preview, and it does, like for instance in .NET, it does turn off some of the features that are part of App Insights as itself, because it's going to really only focus on distributed tracing. All right, let me get out to. And the other thing I want to point out before I get into the code is the documentation is phenomenal on App Insights. You can pretty much Google or Bing or whatever you want, application insights, and put in a topic. So I mentioned earlier, tracking page views. They have good samples on how to do it in multiple languages and how you want to expose that, or additional properties that you want to set. They also have a detailed documentation that's awesome about building out the application map, overriding cloud names, and specific things on how you can tweak the cloud roles. And then good detailed documentation about the telemetry correlation that's built in. So every request that comes in gets an ID. And then as additional dependencies and requests come from that, they have a parent ID, and that operation ID is tracked through every request. So let's get into the code. All right, so I've got a couple of things here. I'm going to start with App Insights works in every cloud. If you want it on-prem, any of that. So I have an App Insights instance right here. This is a console subscription, and I can go into live metrics, and right now my app is not running. So I can go into my console app and run it, and I have some foreground and background tasks that are running. This application just started, and App Insights, this is the live metrics. This just started up, so I can see incoming requests. I can see request duration. If there's failures, as I move my mouse between these, they line up all of the different graphs, so I can kind of track things. I'm getting outputs of my different events. I can see the server it's running on, which is my machine. So I've got live metrics available, and I've got, I'm using a normal configuration to pull in a App Insights instance. Many times what they want is a connection string or an instrumentation key. Those are what's needed. This kind of setup is all provided in the documentation. So once you've kind of got your connection string and you just new up a client, you can do a lot of stuff with it. You can just track an event. You can track a dependency and say how long it took. I was saying it took about 300 milliseconds or 230 for the requests. So we can see that reflected. This is how you track those events. It's very easy to do. Client dot, and track an event, track an exception, so super easy to do this. And I've got on my console app, I have a background task that's also running. And so here I started an operation with some dependency. It was a background task, and I added some additional information and properties to my telemetry and tracked events. So, and I'm tracing the behavior of that background as it goes, and I'm updating my message. This is a very easy way to get information about how long something's taking, and I'm just doing it from a very basic console app. Let's actually look at what we might want to do with a web app, though. Let's say we're doing a web app. Now, I have two web apps here. I have a basic site, and so this is a very basic site that I've set up. .NET new, web app. It's taking a sec to spin up. There we go. So I've just got a very basic site. There is on the web app, an app service in Azure, there's this Application Insights tab. Now, I haven't turned it on yet. I specifically didn't turn it on because I wanted to kind of highlight what happens as you start interacting with these sites. So if I look at live metrics, guess what? Oh, I have a different site running. So if I look here, this is not capturing any interactions with mine. This is a different instance. I have two instances pointed, but it's not capturing anything. It's not capturing any interactions. It's not capturing any requests. So let's go back and look at a different site. So this is the exact same code, the exact same everything, but in this case, I turned on App Insights. I enabled it. So I didn't make any code changes. I did absolutely nothing to it, but I did turn it on the app service. And there's some options here I can get from .NET and .NET Core, where I can, have interop. I can enable a profiler, a snapshot debugger. I can look at SQL commands. So I can enable this, and let's see what this gives me. So this is pointing at that same App Insights page. But if I now look at the live metrics, I'm going to start seeing, as I click around and I refresh, I'm going to start seeing request duration. I'm going to start seeing real statistics happen from this application. I can look at my application map and say, see here, I have a base app insights and it's calling out to the profiler. So I can start getting some statistics about, how many calls, the average call times. I can look for failures. So I don't have any failures on my server side. Oops, I meant to stay over there. There we go. Yeah, so I can look for server and browser error rates and dig into these. I can look at my performance and start tracking like which requests are going through for JavaScript, for CSS, and how long things are taking. And then I can get, oh, I'm from Tampa. Most of my requests are falling into the 250 millisecond bucket. I can get a little bit more information about the different requests that are making that up. And then I can look at an end-to-end request, which for this one, it's just one request. I'll show more shortly. But all I did for that application was go down here to App Insights and enable it. So what if we go to the next step? And the next step is let's add in the SDK. Go ahead and make this a little bit. So I have this site here, and I have added, just to be transparent, I added in a few extensions, NuGet packages. So I added in the App Insights NuGet package, ASP Core Dependency Collector. These are all added in. And what did I do to enable it? So if you look right here in my configure services call, I've just done services.add app insights telemetry. This out of the box is going to do a couple of things. It's going to look in your configuration for app insights section in your config file. It's going to look for a telemetry key or an instrumentation key or a connection string. And so if I have the right configuration in place, which I've made mistakes and I've checked in configuration strings before, so I try not to. It looks for, you can see it right there that it looks for this. And this can be filled in by a CI/CD pipeline. It can be transformed per event. Locally, what I'm doing is I'm using user secrets. But by convention, if you have that setting, add app insights telemetry takes care of that for you. And I'll go over these in a moment. But you can just add in the SDK and add app insights telemetry, and it will start capturing web requests coming in. It will start capturing errors, log messages, just out of the box. Now, for the front end browser, the JavaScript side, you can add in, and I'm showing you here in this layout, there's a JavaScript snippet that gets added. So if I go back to that basic website that I had that was showing data, and if I inspect this page, one of the things it does, I'm just being dumb right now. I want to see, not the elements, sources. If you see, and let me make this wider. One of the things it added when I enabled App Insights is it added this little block here. So I added a script tag that added App Insights to the JavaScript on the front end. And it has an instrumentation key, and it registers App Insights in the window and registers track page view. but it also will do some interesting things where you can start seeing browser errors. So if I go down here to failures and browser, it should have showed, I might not have an error in that one. I think I do in my advanced one. So let's look at the advanced one when it's running. So I've added in the telemetry on this guy. Bring up the page. Thank you for bearing with me. Let's go back to the App Insights. This was not running yet because I hadn't hit it. So this is coming up. And there we go. It's just initializing. I've got the SDK in place. I can see the dependency calls. I can see call failure rates. I'm getting CPU and memory information. So all that's good. Yep. And we're seeing some traces about encryption. If I go poke around in different places, all this will start populating. The failure and performance usually take about 5 minutes beyond the code. So I'll come back to that momentarily. Let's go back to these telemetry things I talked about, these initializers and processors. So I've got them in a folder right here. These are checked in and I'll show them. So I have a demo telemetry initializer. What does this do? So it is run on every request. So it gets a telemetry, and yeah, if standard or issue a track request. So if it's not a request, maybe this is a dependency telemetry, or this is an exception telemetry. So what I'm doing is I'm only going to try to initialize request telemetry. So if I have a request, I'm going to add in some additional properties. Chris Ayers, I'm going to add in a request property that it's a demo. So when I go up and look, I should be able to see is demo as a property, and I should be able to search on it. I also had another dependency initializer for override 400s. Maybe I have in my application 404s or something, and I want to make sure that I show 400s as a success for some reason. So I can take this telemetry and parse out the response code. I can do whatever logic I want to modify or tweak a telemetry. So I can get certain types of telemetry. I can set and override properties. I can add additional properties. All of these things I can do so that maybe I don't see 404s as an error. Maybe I see it as just something I ignore. Again, business case. This is something that comes up. And then let's look at filtering. Let's look at what filtering looks like in a processor. You just inherit from the processor. Now, the way this works is it's just like ASP middleware. You have a kind of a pointer to your next filter that you're going to process. So it takes a parameter on the constructor. That way you can build the chain of processors. And then you can just set some sort of function, some sort of method if you want. If I return from this, it never goes down the processor chain, and maybe it gets dropped, or maybe I just stop processing. But I can do my filtering. I can pick what I want, and I can set properties on it. I've given this a minute. Let me see if we have some more telemetry. So this is that search I was talking about earlier. I can filter it down to 30 minutes. I've got all my traces. I've got page views. You can see I've got a couple of requests. And if I look in my requests, I can see all telemetry for that user session, everything before and after. I have an exception here. So I have a reference error from my JavaScript and my site that there's something wrong with my JavaScript. And if I go and look and kind of poke around, I can find out that Yeah, on my index page, in my layout, maybe I have some bad JavaScript in here somewhere, and I can just kind of poke around and try to find out where it is. That's what this lets you get. Like, you're starting to see weird. So site.js in my JS folder, you can start seeing weird errors that you didn't know existed in your client side apps, and maybe start poking around and go, oh, I had some bad JavaScript. I had something that wasn't working right. And so now, like, I know when I worked on stuff, trying to get front end errors back into my application was a pain in the butt. But now I can start seeing those in-app insights all at once. Any questions right now? I've got my server requests. I can drill down into certain time periods. I've got my transaction search, and this is the one that's awesome. If I do like privacy, I have a C. There, helps if I type. I can see a session. I can see the browser I'm using. I can see some additional information about it. So these are the page views. These are the requests. Here's the exception that popped up during it. I can apply other filters. So I have all these properties I can look for. If I'm looking for a specific dependency type, a database, if I find someone had an error, and I can then tie it to an operation, like, all of those things add up, and it lets you drill into the information that you need to start troubleshooting this. You can kind of drag and drop and limit it to a certain amount of time to get the specific requests you need. And then you can go also into performance. And so you can start doing that breakdown of, like, let's go look at these 99th percentile requests. Or let's look at the ones that are around 160 and see what our dependencies were. Let's look at where those requests were coming from. What were the main things that were causing the issue? And then we can go look at some of these things in the logs. So because App Insights is integrated with Azure Monitor and Log Analytics, you can start using KQL to query your data. So you can look at requests and find specific information about timestamps. You can, drag out the specific information that you need, and start making charts if you need to. And you have access to all of the data sources as you're digging through, operation ID. So you can generate some really quick queries, response time trend, request time trend. You can get this information, and then once you've built these queries, if you need to, you can share them out, or you can add them to an alert, or you can add them to a dashboard. There's so much power in diving into your data and starting to figure out what's happening. And they've even added, because this is built on Log Analytics, the newer models of this have this workbook capability in these troubleshooting guides. So you can start trying to solve these, and what they'll do is they'll have multiple queries that all run. And so you can start trying to hone in on where that error might happen. Are there any questions right now? All right. So the other thing I had talked about earlier was some of the user and session and usage data. What this lets you do is leverage cohorts and how users interact. So maybe you have a cohort, a group of users that are not authenticated, or maybe a group of users that do authenticate, and you can see these are some pre-generated ones that they have. People that don't have sessions, people that have long sessions. Maybe you want to track certain events or operations with a certain event that failed. You can make kind of automatic groups of users, and then look at how those users come through, how they interact. So show me all the users or only authenticated users that maybe hit anything, like hit a page, hit an event, had a request, or maybe I just want to limit it to certain requests, and it'll filter down those users that did those interactions. Once you have some users, maybe you want to look at sessions. How many sessions are coming through that are doing those events? You can start drilling down into people that are using specific features that you've built. Driving down into the events. So we have maybe some insights into the events and the browsers and the versions of Windows. So this is where you start driving that usage. Remember, I talked about the quick edit grid we had before. So I can pick an initial event, hitting the main website, and it'll create a graph. So I got a favorite icon, and I was navigating places, I got an error. You can start tracking how that usage goes through. I've got one or two more demos, but I wanted to pause before I went on. Any questions?
There's a couple questions in the chat.
Okay, I have that on a different screen, so I didn't see that. So let me go here. All right. Why do my app services say App Insights Preview? All right, let me check on that one sec. What happens if your Azure part became not active? Let's try that one. So this application here, has the code in place, and this has it on. So let's disable it. So here's what it says. This is going to turn off a setting, but in your code, you still might have the SDK and instrumentation key. So let's see what happens because I've turned it off. Let's see if it's still kind of picking up that I have an application running. Some of these interactions I'm not 100% sure of. So it looks like it's still gonna connect and run. So I'm pretty sure that, oh, maybe it is offline. Oh, because it said it was going to restart. So let's reopen this web page. Go back to App Insights data. Yep. So the application is going to override that Azure setting. That Azure setting is, like I said, an auto instrumentation convenience thing that if you explicitly enable it, this is most likely going to override that. I will double check on the App Insights preview thing in one sec. What other objects on the graph that the web is connected to? Is it monitoring requests from web apps to other resources? Yes. Okay. So application map. And what's nice about application map is it's seeing that, yeah, I'm making calls, I'm getting some weird requests. So we can learn more about this. And then this is where, like I said, the documentation is phenomenal. So components are things that you've deployed and you can do. You can add your tags and instance, but then there are observed external dependencies. So yeah, SQL, Event Hub, all of these type of things can be fed into it. You can, think you can add additional information with the properties, and yeah, 1,000 ungrouped nodes. They'll tell you if you have more than 10,000. So it's going to detect a lot of things that you're talking to in Azure, external websites. A lot of those are going to come through. Most of the Azure platform is instrumented out of the box. Now, I'm not sure about the preview thing, but let me answer that last question I saw. about KQL. So what that language I was showing you was when I was here and I went view and logs. So this is pretty much log analytics, and these queries that I was running that you see here, what these are KQL. So there's a right here. Here's a language reference. It's called Custo Query Language. This is an extremely powerful language for and you can see there's a lot of information here around under Data Explorer about like taking events, quickly filtering them out. It lets you do all sorts of crazy stuff like have graphs. Yeah, so you can render out charts. You can take the top 10. You can do projections. You can do joins. This is used in Sentinel and Defender. This is used in Data Explorer. KQL is an amazing language. So if you start going down the route of really trying to drill into your logs and your data, you're going to come across this, and it would not hurt to take a little bit of time to dive into learning that. So a cohort is really a marketing type of term. So when we're talking about cohorts, it's really just whoops. That worked. Cohort is a set of users, sessions, or events that have something in common. And the way you can do that in App Insights is a query. I want everybody who has a certain type of browser. I want everyone from this region. I want everyone who's logged in or ordered something in the past. Let me get to my last demo then, since we got about 4 or 5 minutes left. So one of the things that I talked about earlier was there was plugins for React. So I just wanted to quickly show kind of a front end one where they have an npm package that they've built out for React.js, and you can pretty much just import it into your application. You can import in App Insights tracking and kind of plug in your key. So I have an app JSX here, and yeah, we've got a telemetry provider, a plugged in an app key, and you can see a lot of different requests where we're doing App Insights. We've defined it. We're doing the same tracking that we did before. I've just this is a sample that's running out that's out in GitHub, and I just did an npm install and an npm start. And I can post a link to this if anyone's interested. Here is the GitHub repo where it is, but I pointed it at a React application, and you can see app is loading. So it's starting that server, but it's throwing exceptions. So I can see exceptions from my React application. I can see custom events. I can see, hey, I'm in a React demo. I've gotten an exception. So you can drill through those requests from the front end. You can see stack trace on some of the code. You can see everything available for that user session and how they interacted with the application. Tracing that people have put up there with information. So it has front end support, back end support, and it all really comes together to provide a good distributed trace. You see, I'm doing some requests out to HTTP bin, hitting my local host. So this sample is the thing that got detected. I think I got 2 minutes left, so thank you, everybody. If you have any more questions, please, you can come off mute. You can type it in the chat. I hope this was beneficial, and I hope this showed the power of App Insights and some options you can use to drill into your data and enhance your data to troubleshoot applications more effectively.
Thanks, Chris. Very insightful.
I realize I don't have a ton of detailed code samples for every scenario, but like I said, the documentation is phenomenal, and understanding how you can leverage the tool and where you can apply it, I think provides more benefit.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Any other questions?
Thank you.
I was thinking about trying it out, but I only have a certain amount of free time on Azure. Is it going to kill me? Like, is it something I should worry about as far as just playing around with it? As far as
No, it's not something that should worry you. And more than that, you can set. So here's the usage and estimated costs. Each instance of App Insights, so you can see here, estimated costs, price 230. Right now, 0. I've used in some of my apps 4K out of 5 gigs free. And then if I needed to, I could come in here and go, hey, I just don't want to track anything or 1%. And then you can also configure a daily cap. So you can say, hey, my daily volume cap is 1 gig a day max, and warn me. Like you can do all sorts of stuff.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
And then, of course, with anything in Azure, if you are concerned, there is such a thing as the advisor. The advisor has cost recommendations. And then you can also go to your subscription. And if you, in your subscription, you can go to cost analysis and cost alerts. So you can set budgets and you can set a cost alert and say, hey, I want to know if I go over $1 or a penny or something like that. So that you get alerted if something goes nuts, you know?
Cool, thanks so much. Yeah, because that's always the thing. Like, if my credit card's in there, we want to make sure that it's not going to go nuts.
I completely understand. Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I think we're at time. Please enjoy your next sessions, and thanks the Philly Code Camp organizers for putting us on. I think they've done a great job.
Thank you.